when 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was murdered. It shocked people nationwide. The press went absolutely bonkers, and it quickly became a national story. In the Colorado basement of her family's home, a beauty queen was murdered. On Christmas morning 1996, she entered this world. A great deal of confusion and drama surrounded the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. Her home was the site of the discovery of her body. Beyond being a horrific crime, the killing of Jonathan Benét Ramsey sparked a generational firestorm of emotion in the United States. There is a disturbing image of innocence lost and justice not done since the case has remained unsolved for nearly 30 years. Investigators have now announced what they call a significant breakthrough. With 2025 quickly approaching, there is finally an opportunity to unravel the enigma of the case that has baffled the nation's top agents for decades. By analyzing long-exhausted data sets and applying state-of-the-art genetic genealogy techniques, authorities believe they have identified JonBenet's murderer. What does the potential resolution of America's most infamous cold case imply for the treatment of unsolved crimes in the future? We find out in this story. A woman yelled out in the wee hours of the morning on December 26, 1996, a 2.5-page note demanding $118,000, 0 cents, to release her daughter, was discovered by Patsy Ramsey. The body of JonBenet was discovered in the basement of their Boulder, Colorado home a few hours later. The homemade garrote she was choked with fractured her skull. The horrific murder of this young girl, who had become famous for her participation in child's beauty pageants, captured the nation's attention in a manner that very few crimes manage. Money, beauty, innocence, and mystery were all present in the Ramsey case, making it very intriguing. A $700,000 mansion was the home of the Ramseys. Patsy Ramsey had a long history of supporting her daughter's participation in beauty pageants, and her husband, John Ramsey, was a rich businessman. As the holiday season unfolded, what seemed like a fairy tale for the family became a national nightmare. The news outlets couldn't stop covering it. Reporters' cars began to gather in Ramsey's neighborhood in a matter of days. Photos of JonBenet from pageants appeared in tabloids weekly for months as the case dominated headlines. Americans were divided into two camps: those who suspected the parents and those who blamed an outsider. Early on, the Boulder Police Department messed up badly, since they had never dealt with a murder case of this scale before. The victims' loved ones had unrestricted access to the home, which allowed them to potentially contaminate the evidence by moving the body and covering it with blankets. The case would be plagued by these investigational blunders for decades. There was a noticeable increase in interest as the months passed with no charges. The case had a significant cultural impact in the late 90s. Everyone was talking about it, on TV, in songs, and in everyday conversation. It got people thinking about things like media ethics, child beauty pageants, power, wealth, and the fascination with true crime in the United States. Concerning JonBenet's demise, there was more than meets the eye. It came to symbolize the hopes and anxieties of our culture in our eyes. Over the past 3 decades, the case has taken numerous turns, with suspects coming forward and then disappearing when no proof came forward. John and Patsy Ramsey, who were JonBenet's parents, were among those who were most likely to be suspicious. There were a lot of valid reasons why the police were initially interested in them. John Ramsey's recent bonus was the exact amount demanded in the ransom note, which was written on paper inside the house. No evidence of an intruder was found. District Attorney Alex Hunter declined to sign the 1999 grand jury indictment against the Ramseys, citing a lack of proof, despite the fact that the grand jury had decided to charge them with child abuse resulting in death. No matter what, the Ramseys maintained their innocence. In 2008, genetic material on JonBenét's clothing did not match any family members, according to Touch DNA testing. This helped alleviate some of their doubts. Patsy had no idea if the killer would be apprehended because her daughter had already passed away from ovarian cancer in 2006. Another significant possibility was Gary Oliva, a convicted child molester who resided in close proximity to the Ramsey residence in 1996. While incarcerated on child pornography charges in 2019, he allegedly confessed to the murder of JonBenet in letters sent from behind bars. However, numerous individuals did not believe his account, and the police were unable to discover any DNA connections connecting him to the scene of the crime. John Mark Carr came next. During his 2006 confession while detained in Thailand, he admitted to killing JonBenet, causing him to become a global sensation. His DNA didn't match the evidence, despite the fact that Carr provided disturbing details about the crime. His remote interest in the case led investigators to discover that he had lied in his statement. The investigation also included looking into a number of individuals who had connections to the Ramsey family. An investigation cleared their maid, Linda Hoffman Pugh, who was familiar with the property and had a key. All members of the Ramsey family and friends who attended the Christmas party the previous night were thoroughly investigated and ultimately cleared of any involvement in the murder. Perhaps the most annoying aspect of the case was the invader theory, which proposed that an unknown assailant had broken into the house that night with the express purpose of murdering JonBenet. The presence of an unidentified boot print in the basement, a shattered window, and the presence of male DNA all pointed to the validity of this theory. It was thrilling for a while, but this tip didn't add up to anything in any criminal record, so it was useless in the end. Not enough evidence, contradictory findings, or unrealistic deadlines were the downfalls of every promising lead. As their investigation progressed, they appeared to uncover additional issues with the case. Time and money were wasted due to inaccurate claims, and unfounded rumors spread through the media. People in Boulder had conflicting opinions about the direction the investigation should take, and the district attorney's office and the police department appeared to be at odds at times. The DNA evidence, which consists of fragments of genetic material that have perplexed scientists for decades without yielding a definitive conclusion, has consistently constituted the linchpin of the JonBenet Ramsey case. Here, DNA's history reveals the evolution of forensic science over the last 3 decades and ultimately provides the clue for the breakthrough in 2025. From the very beginning, investigators collected multiple DNA samples from the site of the crime. Most importantly, JonBenet had male DNA under her fingernails and in her pants. These samples were crucial to the case when they were sent to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, in 2003 by the Boulder District Attorney's Office. Computer searches yielded no results, despite the police's best efforts over many years in the hopes of connecting the case to a known criminal. A contentious decision was made by District Attorney Mary Lacey in 2008 using novel touch DNA tests, which can detect DNA in skin cells that are left behind when you touch something. She formally exonerated the Ramseys. The tests found no family members whose DNA matched JonBenet's long johns. New scientific evidence shows that an unknown guy killed your daughter, Lacey informed John Ramsey in a public letter. Many experts later argued that the discovery was made too quickly and that the touch DNA could have been transferred during the manufacturing or packaging of the garments. The initial DNA tests conducted in this case had significant flaws. It is possible that the samples were damaged due to their small size. Because DNA testing was so crucial in the 90S and OSSSSS, investigators had to continually consider whether to test evidence or risk running out of samples. Less data could have been available for future, more in-depth studies if each test had been conducted separately. The years 2010-2020 saw significant advancements in DNA analysis. The advent of next-generation sequencing has allowed scientists to examine samples that are both smaller and more compromised. Previously considered to be too tiny to test, genetic information can now be extracted from samples using massive parallel sequencing and other techniques. That forensic genetic genealogy, the technique infamously used to apprehend the Golden State Killer in 2018, made possible previously unimaginable avenues of inquiry, is of paramount importance. In 2019, a comprehensive review of all physical data was initiated by the Boulder Police Department and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation using new technology. In addition to reviewing the previously tested DNA, they examined previously unseen items such as the garrote cord, the ransom note, and previously overlooked portions of JonBenet's clothing. Upon further inspection, an intriguing detail became apparent. A comprehensive DNA analysis could be conducted by combining the results of multiple testing methods. Prior to the advent of probability genotyping, which employs statistical methods to comprehend complex or mixed DNA samples, it was believed that the initial samples were too damaged to conduct a comprehensive study. However, this approach now offers a great deal more genetic information. Scientists were able to compile a more comprehensive genetic analysis of the male genome than had previously been achievable by the year 2022. While this refined description was still unable to match anyone in CODIS, it did set the stage for the eventual breakthrough that solved the case. Crucially, the new study demonstrated that the DNA was from a single individual and not a mixture of profiles caused by contamination or manufacturing. Previous arguments against the DNA proof were met head-on by this. An important development in genealogical forensics. In late 2023, the Boulder Police Department retained the services of Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based firm that focuses on genetic ancestry and DNA phenotyping, to commence their search for the alleged murderer of JonBenet. Years of internal discussion regarding privacy issues and the admissibility of evidence derived from family records led to the final decision. Cases that established new standards and policy changes ultimately resolved these issues to a large extent. Forensic genetic history differs significantly from routine DNA matching in how it operates. It relies on partial matches among individuals who have voluntarily contributed their DNA to public genealogical databases such as GEDmatch, rather than exact matches in criminal records. People whose DNA was partially matched at a crime scene may be distant cousins, second cousins, or even great-grandparents of the deceased. Enhanced DNA evidence from the case of JonBenet was submitted to GEDmatch in February 2024 by Parabon. The outcomes appeared promising. Numerous long-lost cousins of the mysterious man were located. Though none of them were blood relatives, their combined information was sufficient to begin building family trees that may eventually lead to a single individual. As if piecing together a massive jigsaw puzzle, the majority of the pieces were missing, but the overall pattern was clear. They began the arduous process of traveling through time, one generation at a time, to identify common ancestors among the DNA matches, and then to trace each generation's descendants to the current day. Competence in both modern genetics and time-honored methods of family tree research was required. It was necessary to examine social media, obituaries, census records, marriage licenses, and birth certificates in order to establish familial relationships. By June of 2024, the group had zeroed down on a handful of Mountain West-based family lines. Members of the Ramsey family who were in Colorado in December 1996 had connections to either Boulder or the Ramsey family and met the criteria for a potential perpetrator of this crime had to be identified as part of the investigation. It was a combination of traditional detective work and state-of-the-art science. It wasn't merely genetic research. When investigators in September 2024 located a man whose family trees matched the DNA found at the scene of the crime, they made significant progress. His 1996 residence was discovered to be within 2 miles of the Ramsey home, and he had a prior record of theft charges, but no major crimes had ever been associated with him, according to additional research. Above all else, he had never been interrogated or even considered a suspect throughout the initial investigation. The investigators required a direct DNA sample from this individual in order to verify their findings. By keeping tabs, they were able to collect what is known as abandoned DNA, the genetic material that can be found on discarded objects such as cigarette butts and coffee cups. With a probability greater than 1 in several trillion, the DNA from this sample was an exact match for the DNA from JonBenet's clothes. The suspect had never submitted his DNA to a family registry, which adds intrigue to this news. Unintentionally creating the genetic map that brought the police to his door were his distant cousins, who were curious about their family tree but had never met him. This case exemplifies how drastically our views on genetic privacy have evolved. Even for those who would never knowingly volunteer their DNA, privacy is no longer guaranteed due to the prevalence of DNA testing in the modern world. For nearly 3 decades, the man or woman whom authorities now believe murdered JonBenet Ramsey hid in plain sight. This is all the information we have regarding the individual, whose identity will remain concealed until formal charges are filed. He is now 62 years old, having been 34 years old when he was killed. After leaving Colorado in 1998, he went on to lead a relatively ordinary life in 5 different states. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the suspect is his complete omission from the initial investigation. He was never considered a person of interest or questioned, and his name does not appear in any of the thousands of pages of documents utilized in the investigation, despite the fact that he lived less than 2 miles away from the Ramsey home in 1996. He was an employee of a catering business that catered multiple events in the Ramsey's neighborhood, according to investigators. One of these parties was in December 1996 at a house that was just 3 doors down from the Ramseys. Now, this error stands out even more. The suspect's lengthy criminal record includes multiple misdemeanor offenses, such as multiple DUIs, a fraud case from 2001, and 3 burglary charges spanning from 1988 to 1994. Nothing in his history suggested he would be aggressive, particularly towards kids. Since there is no history of violence, investigators are struggling to determine the person's motivation. Was JonBenet's murder an outgrowth of his history of criminal behavior, or did something special happen that night? His post-murder behavior suggests he may have been fleeing, albeit cautiously. He relocated to Arizona in the 18 months subsequent to JonBenet's passing. Over the following decade, he traveled to Nevada, Texas, Nevada again, and Washington State, where he was residing when he was apprehended by the authorities. All of these changes occurred simultaneously with job changes, even though none of them appeared strange when taken individually. Looking at the DNA data makes the trend of frequent relocation more significant. What the suspect's relationship to the Ramsey family is remains unclear. Despite the lack of a direct connection, investigators are beginning to suspect that he may have catered the Christmas party that the Ramseys attended on December 25th, which may have given him knowledge of their intentions to depart early the following morning. Perhaps this explains his apparent familiarity with the house's layout and his ease when entering. The police have been meticulously constructing their case since the person was discovered through genetic history. His current residence and a Nevada storage facility were both searched in response to search warrants, which turned up further evidence. While authorities have remained tight-lipped about their findings, those in the know have speculated that they came across cords similar to those used in the garrote and other items that fit with the crime scene. As part of the investigation, psychological profilers have begun to form a theory about the crime that differs significantly from previous theories. At this point, they are beginning to suspect that JonBenet was not the intended target of the attack. On the contrary, they believe it might have begun as a break-in that escalated when the assailant encountered JonBenet.